My name is Virginia Hale, and for most of my adult life, I carried a secret that felt heavier than my own heartbeat. I was a millionaire. Not the loud, camera-flashing kind you see in magazines, not the type who brags at dinner parties. No, my wealth lived in silence, tucked behind a calm face and plain clothes, hidden from everyone, especially my family. Sometimes I wondered if I hid it to protect myself, or if I did it to protect them. Maybe it was both. But whatever the reason, the truth was mine alone, wrapped tightly like a locked diary I never wanted anyone else to read. My empire did not start in a glamorous office with floor-to-ceiling windows or with investors throwing money my way. It began in a small, aging apartment in Maplebridge, Ohio, where the walls were thin and the heating rattled every winter night. I remember sitting at a wobbly wooden desk I bought secondhand for $40, typing until my fingers went numb. I worked long after the city slept, sometimes until dawn bled through my blinds. While the world outside kept turning, I studied market reports, learned code, built small programs, and taught myself everything I could about tech acquisitions. Every penny I earned, I reinvested. Every failure, I studied until I understood where I had gone wrong. It was quiet work, lonely work, but it was mine. My first major victory came when I purchased a struggling analytics company for $62,000. Friends, the few I had back then, called me reckless. But after a year of rebuilding their systems and redesigning their product, I sold the company for $2.4 million. That moment felt like stepping onto a new planet, one only I could see. From there, I bought more companies across America, some tiny and fading, others full of potential but trapped under poor leadership. I sold every one at a profit. Slowly, my bank account swelled, and the freedom I'd always dreamed of finally felt real. When my earnings reached the point where I could no longer pretend they were lucky breaks, I built something permanent. A headquarters in Stonemont, Colorado, a structure of white stone and glass, sleek and quiet against the mountain skyline. It cost a little over $18 million, and every time I drove past it, I felt both shock and gratitude. The building looked modest from the outside, intentionally so, but inside it was the heart of everything I had created. I kept the design simple: clean lines, modern offices, open windows facing the hills. I wanted a space where ideas could breathe. Still, I told no one in my family what I had accomplished. Not because I didn't love them, but because love in my house was complicated. I grew up in a home where money was always a problem, where my parents used it as a weapon against each other. They argued about bills, about debts, about who was wasting what. Every holiday, every birthday, every little setback turned into a shouting match about dollars and responsibility. Maybe that's why I hid everything, because I feared the moment they discovered I had more money than they ever dreamed of, they would see me as a solution to their problems rather than their daughter. The one person I tried hardest to protect was my brother, Caleb. We were close growing up, at least when we were young. He was the one who made me laugh when our parents were fighting in the next room. He always talked about wanting to be successful, wanting to prove to the world he mattered. I carried that memory with me, even after we grew apart. So when my company expanded and I needed someone to manage operations, I offered him a job. I didn't tell him it was my company. I simply said I had connections, which was true enough. I gave him the role of general manager, something most people would work a decade for. Caleb didn't even blink. He accepted the job like it was owed to him. I waited for gratitude, even a small hint of it, but it never came. Caleb treated the position like a stage where he could show off, not understanding that I had placed him there gently, with good intentions. He bragged to friends that he must have impressed the real owner during the interview, never knowing the real owner was me. He strutted through the halls like a prince, and every time I watched him, I wondered whether I had given him too much, too fast. Yet I kept hoping he would grow into his role. I convinced myself that helping him was the right decision, that one day he would discover the truth and be proud of me. But then he started taking credit for things he had not done. He claimed responsibility for deals he never touched, told employees he worked directly with upper management on decisions when, in reality, I had been the one approving everything behind the scenes. I didn't mind him taking small victories here and there. I wanted him to feel accomplished. But slowly, his pride twisted into something sharper, something that cut whenever I got too close. Even so, I did not fire him. Even so, I kept hoping. My parents adored him, of course. Caleb was the golden child, the one they believed would become successful first. Whenever we all met for dinner, my mother would say, "Your brother has such potential, Virginia. You should follow his example." I would sit there silently, sipping my water, my empire hidden behind a calm smile. I didn't tell them about the deals I closed or the buildings I owned. I didn't tell them about the nights I worked without rest, building a world they could never imagine. I kept everything inside, safe from their expectations and judgments. Sometimes, late at night in my Colorado office, I would stare at the city lights below and wonder whether hiding the truth from my family made me selfish or wise. But the answer never came easily. Secrets change you. They form walls around your heart, and once those walls rise, it becomes hard to remember what life looked like before them. Still, I held on to the hope that one day I could bring my family into the world I built. One day, I could tell them everything and hear pride in their voices. One day, Caleb would see that the hand guiding his success had been mine all along, and maybe, just maybe, he would thank me. But life rarely gives us the endings we imagine, and the truth I protected so carefully was about to shatter in the most unexpected, painful way. The day I learned Caleb was getting married, I was sitting alone in my office in Stonemont, scanning through quarterly reports. I wasn't told by family or by Caleb himself. I found out through one of my employees, who casually mentioned it during a meeting as if it were common knowledge. I remember nodding and pretending I already knew, even though the news hit me like a stone dropped into still water. I waited for a call, a text, an invitation, something that showed I mattered enough to be included. But the days passed quietly. My phone stayed silent. When the wedding date was finally announced publicly and still no invitation appeared in my mailbox, I felt a cold ache settling in my chest. My parents didn't even mention it. They had grown very skilled at treating me as a distant relative rather than a daughter, especially in moments that should have brought us together. When I finally confronted my mother, she sighed in that tired way she always used when she wanted to make me feel unreasonable. "Sweetheart," she said, "we didn't want you to feel out of place. You know how you get around big events. We thought it was kinder to spare you the stress." Out of place? I was the one paying Caleb's salary. I had built the company that allowed him to brag to the world about his career. If anyone deserved a seat at his wedding, it was me, not because I was his employer, but because I was his sister. Still, something inside me refused to stay angry. I kept hearing that small, loyal voice inside, the one that always believed things could be fixed with enough effort, telling me to try one last time. So I decided to go to the wedding unannounced, not in anger, but in hope. I wanted to show Caleb that family still mattered to me. I wanted to surprise him with a gift that could change his entire life. I chose a soft blue dress, elegant but not flashy, and slipped the most important document I had ever written into a silver gift box, a letter officially naming Caleb as the next CEO of my entire empire. I had spent weeks drafting it, imagining the look on his face when he realized that all the responsibility, all the trust, all the leadership, everything he had dreamed of, would be placed in his hands. Despite his behavior over the years, I believed that giving him this power might push him to grow, to become the man I always thought he could be. The wedding took place at a grand estate in Brighton Hill, Virginia, a sprawling property with white stone paths, manicured hedges, and fountains that glimmered in the afternoon light. The estate was the kind people rented for extravagant events, the kind that cost nearly $75,000 just to reserve for a weekend. I walked through the entrance quietly, hoping to slip in without causing a scene. The guests were dressed in soft pastels and polished suits, chatting politely as they drifted from one decorated area to another. I clutched the gift box gently, keeping it close as if the future itself was inside it. When I finally spotted Caleb near the stage, he was laughing loudly with a group of friends, basking in the attention. I felt a small smile form on my lips as I approached him, imagining for one brief moment the joy he might feel when he realized what I had brought. But the moment he saw me, his expression shifted. The smile fell from his face, replaced by something sharp and dismissive. "What are you doing here?" he said loudly, his voice carrying across the room. I froze. It wasn't the question that hurt, it was the tone.
Cold. Public. Cruel.
"I came to surprise you," I said softly, raising the gift box slightly. Before I could say more, before I could explain anything, he laughed. The people around him joined in, not because they understood the joke, but because they followed his lead. "This is my wedding," he said mockingly. "No begging allowed." For a moment, the world around me blurred. My ears rang. The gift box in my hands suddenly felt heavier than stone. I could feel dozens of eyes turning toward us, watching, waiting for my reaction. My cheeks burned. Not with shame. Shame was familiar, but with something hotter, deeper, sharper. Something that had been building for years. I stepped closer, lowering my voice so only he could hear, though the strength in my tone made it clear I was not afraid of being overheard. "Caleb," I said quietly, "you're fired." He blinked, confused. The smirk fell from his face.
"What? No."
You can't fire me." "Yes," I said, "I can." His confusion deepened as I continued. "The company you work for, the one you brag about, the one you pretend you earned your way into, I built it. I own it. Every deal you take credit for, every paycheck you receive, every opportunity you think magically appeared, it came from me. I was about to make you CEO." Gasps rippled through the crowd. My parents, standing a few feet behind me, went pale. Caleb's bride looked stunned, frozen in place beside her decorated arch. The room had become painfully quiet. "But now," I added, "you've shown everyone here that you're not worthy of being hired at all." His mouth opened and closed, as if he were searching for something clever to say, something dismissive or superior, but the words wouldn't come. For the first time in years, I saw him not as the brother I tried to protect, but as a man who had chosen arrogance over kindness, pride over gratitude, and cruelty over love. I placed the CEO letter on the nearest table, leaving it unopened, its silver ribbons still perfectly tied. Then I turned and walked out of the estate, my shoes clicking against the stone pathway. Every step away from the wedding felt like stepping into a new part of my life, one where I no longer needed permission to exist in my own family. Behind me, I heard nothing but silence, and the silence said everything. In the days following Caleb's wedding, my life felt strangely quiet, as if the world had paused to watch me breathe. But that stillness didn't last long. Word travels fast in families, not the truth, but whatever version makes everyone feel less guilty. And once the truth about my wealth slipped into the conversation, the silence around me cracked apart like thin ice. Suddenly, everyone who had ignored me for years seemed to remember my name. It began with distant cousins from Eldenbrook, Pennsylvania, people I hadn't spoken to since my early 20s. They sent cheerful messages about catching up and reconnecting, as if the gap between us was a simple misunderstanding and not a canyon carved by years of absence. Some wrote to tell me how proud they were of me, though none had bothered to ask what I was building during the lonely years of my rise. They spoke as if affection could be rekindled with a single text, so long as that affection came with financial benefits. Then came my mother. Her message arrived late at night, long and dramatic, dripping with a kind of forced sweetness I had never known from her. She wrote about family unity, about how Caleb's wedding had simply been a misunderstanding, about how none of them meant to exclude me. She told me that my success didn't change the fact that we were a family first, and that I should come over for dinner so we could heal together. Reading her words felt like staring at a stranger imitating my mother's handwriting. My father's reaction was even stranger. He didn't text, he called. His voice carried an odd mixture of pride and disappointment, as if my achievements had personally insulted him. "You should have told us, Virginia," he said, with the tone of a father scolding a child who'd kept a bad report card hidden. "We could have helped guide you." Guide me? My hands tightened around the phone as I listened. My father, who never understood my interests, who once told me I was too quiet to ever be a leader, believed he could have guided the woman who built a multi-million-dollar empire alone. I wanted to ask how he planned to guide me when he couldn't guide his own temper growing up, but the words stayed trapped in my throat. I ended the call quickly, lying that I had another meeting. The truth was, I simply couldn't handle the twisted narratives they were building to protect their pride. Within a week, my entire family tree seemed to be budding with sudden affection. Aunts who forgot my birthday for years wanted to visit my home. Uncles who once teased me for being too ambitious now praised me for my drive. Even old classmates from Ashford, Ohio, somehow found my email and wrote long stories about how close we once were. I couldn't decide whether to laugh or cry. If being wealthy meant being seen, then I had never been more visible in my life, and visibility felt like a trap. But nothing compared to the day Caleb appeared at my home in Harborcrest, Maine. That house had become my sanctuary, a grand white-columned estate overlooking the water, a place I had purchased for $4.2 million not for its beauty, but for its silence. From the balcony, I could watch the harbor open into the Atlantic, listen to seagulls cry over the tide, and breathe air that didn't demand anything from me. It was the first place I ever lived that felt like it belonged to the woman I had become, not the girl my family remembered. When the doorbell rang that morning, I expected a delivery or perhaps my landscaper. Instead, when I opened the door, Caleb stood there, shoulders slumped, hair messy, as if he had rushed over without thinking. His eyes were red, not from grief, but from effort. He was trying to look broken, but the act cracked around the edges. "Virginia," he said, voice trembling. "Please. I didn't mean any of it. I was just stressed at the wedding. It came out wrong." I watched him carefully. Behind him, the ocean breeze moved softly through the tall seagrass near the porch steps. In that still frame, Caleb on my porch, mascara-smudged bride nowhere in sight, I realized just how far we had drifted from being true siblings. The boy who once defended me during our parents' arguments was gone. In his place stood a man who had shaped his identity around pride, and now that his pride had been wounded, he was desperate for a balm. "I want to start fresh," he continued quickly, as if afraid I would close the door before he finished. "We can fix things. You and me. We can go back to how things were." But things had never been the way he imagined. And the more he spoke, the more I felt the truth settle firmly into place inside me. Caleb wasn't here because he regretted how he treated me. He was here because he realized the consequences of losing me, the sister who held his professional future in her hands. His tears were not for love. They were for loss of access. "No," I said gently. His expression broke then, not dramatically, but in small, sharp pieces of disbelief. "What do you mean, no?" "I mean no, Caleb. We can't start fresh. We can't go back. Not after everything." He took a step forward, but I didn't move. "I'm your brother," he insisted. "And I tried to be your sister," I said softly. "Longer than you ever realize." His face twisted in confusion and frustration, and for a moment, I saw who he really was. Not the charming man he showed to the world, but the insecure boy who believed the universe owed him success. The man who believed I owed him success. I closed the door slowly, not with anger, but with the peace of someone finally accepting the truth. Once people reveal who they really are, you cannot pretend you didn't see it. Money didn't change me. It changed them. In the weeks that followed, I cut them off, my parents, the cousins, the sudden admirers, and even the people from my past who tried to tie themselves to my story. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't bitterness. It was clarity. I had spent my entire life trying to earn love from people who didn't know how to give it unless there was something in it for them. The silence that followed felt like breathing clean air for the first time in years. My home no longer echoed with old expectations. My phone no longer buzzed with guilt or need. The weight I carried, the one built from years of hiding, pleasing, shrinking, finally lifted. And in that quiet, I began to understand that family is not defined by blood. It is defined by honesty, loyalty, and love freely given. Everything else is just noise. Loneliness has a strange way of slipping into your life. It doesn't storm through the door or shout for attention. It drifts in quietly, settling beside you like an old acquaintance you forgot you knew. After cutting my family out of my life, the silence in my home became both a comfort and a challenge. I had grown up surrounded by noise, arguments echoing from the kitchen, accusations tossed across the living room, guilt woven into every holiday. When that noise disappeared, I expected to feel relief, and in a way, I did. But I also felt an unexpected hollowness, as if the parts of me shaped by all those years of tension didn't quite know what to do with peace. My home in Harborcrest, Maine became my retreat. The grand white columns, the soft cream walls, the gentle hum of the ocean beyond my backyard, they formed a shell around my life, a place where I could breathe without adjusting myself for anyone else's comfort. Some mornings, I woke to the sunrise breaking over the water, spilling light across my bedroom floor like gold, trying to reassure me I had made the right decisions. Other mornings, the emptiness felt sharp, and I wondered whether the price of truth had been too high. But slowly, I began to fill my days with people who had no interest in my bank account and no stake in my past. These were people who entered my life not because of my wealth, but because of my work, my kindness, or simply the person I was when I wasn't carrying the weight of my parents' expectations or Caleb's shadows. My assistant, Lana Bishop, was the first to remind me what genuine loyalty felt like. Lana lived in Westbourne, Texas, where she shared a small home with her younger sister. She didn't come from wealth. She came from resilience. She joined my company long before it became the empire it is today. Lana had helped me sort through chaos more times than I could count. She once saved the company from losing over $200,000 by catching a fake contract that had slipped into a stack of proposals. Her attention to detail and her strong moral compass never wavered. She didn't treat me like a paycheck. She treated me like a person. And that alone made her feel closer to family than anyone related to me by blood. Then there was Dean Holloway, my head of security. A retired Marine from Ridgeport, Vermont, he carried himself with a steady calm, the kind that comes from seeing more of the world than most people can imagine. Dean wasn't chatty, but he listened deeply. When he first began working for me, he treated the job like any other assignment, professional, serious, distant. But over time, our shared moments, quiet conversations during business trips, planning sessions late at night, or the times I brought him coffee after long hours, built a bond that felt carved from trust rather than obligation. He once taught me how to shoot at a training range outside Greystone, Massachusetts, insisting it was a useful skill for a woman in my position. His reasoning was practical, but the memory stuck with me for a different reason. He didn't ask for extra pay. He didn't mention money. He said the only price was that I buy him a cup of coffee afterward.
I did.
And from that day forward, I felt safe around him, not because of his training, but because he never treated me like a walking dollar sign. It was in these new relationships that I began to rebuild the idea of family, not as something inherited, but as something chosen. People who stood beside me because they cared, not because they wanted something in return. People who valued my presence more than my power. One evening, as the sky darkened over the Atlantic, I stood on the back balcony of my home, watching the ocean move in long, calm waves. The air was warm, carrying the scent of salt and pine. Lights twinkled from distant boats drifting near the harbor, their gentle hum blending with the sound of water touching the shore. I wrapped a soft blanket around my shoulders and let the quiet seep into me. It was there, in that peaceful moment, that I realized something I had missed for years. Family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's the people who choose to stand beside you when your own walk away. Blood might define where your life begins, but choice defines where your life grows. And in that truth, I found freedom. My empire continued expanding, reaching clients across America and into Europe. Offices in Glenford, Illinois, and Rosendale, New York, opened within the same year. Partnerships formed in Edinburgh, Scotland, and Bristol, England, each one strengthening the foundation of everything I'd built. For the first time, success didn't feel like a secret I had to hide or a burden I carried alone. It felt like a reward I could celebrate with the people who truly deserved a place beside me. Lana traveled with me often, turning dull meetings into lively moments of laughter. Dean stood guard but also offered wisdom in the quiet pauses between events. I even befriended Elena Marwood, a financial analyst from Fletcher Grove, Wisconsin, who joined our firm with impressive skill and an even more impressive capacity for empathy. Elena quickly became someone I trusted, someone who asked not, "What do you have?" but "How are you really doing?" Those questions mattered more than they used to. Or maybe I finally understood their importance. As my circle grew with these genuine connections, the ache of losing my family softened. Not vanished, not completely.
But changed.
Like a scar that no longer hurts when touched, even though it still reminds you of what once wounded you. I often walked along the harbor, passing boats tied to the docks, breathing in the waterside air that tasted like beginnings. I thought of the woman I had once been, the one who hid her wealth out of fear and uncertainty, the one who believed love could be earned through sacrifice and silence. That version of me had built an empire but lived in shadows. Not anymore. I was no longer the quiet, hidden millionaire. I was Virginia Hale, a woman who built her world from the ground up and finally learned that strength is not found in what you possess, but in who you allow close to your heart. My story no longer belonged to the people who tried to twist it for their own benefit. It belonged to me, and to the people I chose to walk through life with. People who didn't want my money.
People who wanted me.
And for the first time, that was more than enough.